I was sitting alone in my car, parked just past the perimeter lights at the airport, when the call came through. They'd found something behind a wall, not a body, not a message, just a single fingerprint, clean, recent, and impossible. It didn't make sense. The woman it belonged to had been gone for 10 years. No sightings, no leads, just vanished at 16. And now, her fingerprint fresh as yesterday inside a bathroom no one should have touched. That was the moment I knew something buried was beginning to stir. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from down in the comments, and tap that like and subscribe if stories like this ever brushed past your own town or someone you once knew. Every click helps pull another forgotten name back into the light. My name's Leah Granger. I'm a detective with the Seattle Police Department, and I've lived in this city my whole life. I grew up in Northgate, on a quiet street where porch lights came on at dusk and parents still trusted their kids to bike home alone. Before everything changed, I thought I'd spend my life teaching high school history, maybe writing a book one day. I had this idea that truth was a straight line, like something you could underline in a textbook. But that was before my sister Julia disappeared on a school trip and no one ever found her. She was 12. I was 15. After that, the world didn't feel safe anymore. Not for kids like her. Not for girls like Skylar Monroe. The week the call came in, it had been raining for 5 days straight. Seattle rain isn't loud. It's steady, soft, like a clock ticking in the background. That morning I'd been in the middle of paperwork buried in cold case files that never seemed to thin out. Iris Chen from Forensics stopped by my desk. She had this look like she didn't know whether to hand me the report or throw it in the shredder. They found a fingerprint, she said. Bathroom wall Seagate, matched instantly. I was halfway through asking whose when she slid the name across the table. Skylar Monroe. That name hadn't passed anyone's lips in a decade. The girl with the astronomy book. The girl whose mother cried so hard the day they closed the file she couldn't stand upright. Back then, I was just a rookie. I remembered watching that family unravel in real time and the silence that followed when I asked if we could dig deeper. The case was labeled a runaway and shelved. No further inquiry. So when I pulled up to the service entrance that night and stepped into that sterile half-lit corridor, I wasn't thinking about closure. I was thinking about what had been missed. The print was behind a mirror. A janitor had removed it during renovation. He said it was protocol now to test anything found behind walls ever since that case in Detroit. The mirror had covered a vent, and in the corner of that metal panel was a perfect full fingerprint, Skylar's. Not smudged, not partial, full contact, like someone had pressed their palm there on purpose. No cameras had been working in that hallway the night it was left. No unusual movement on the logs. Nothing to suggest anyone had passed through. But that print, it had been placed 2 days ago. I stood there longer than I meant to. The hallway smelled like bleach and metal. A flickering bulb buzzed above me, and farther down, a floor polisher hummed like a lullaby out of sync. And all I could think was what kind of person returns to the place they disappeared from and leaves a breadcrumb that perfect. The kind who wants to be found. Or the kind who's setting a trap. I pressed my hand to the metal where hers had been. It was cold, solid, real. Then I keyed my radio. "Get me airport security," I said, "and contact the Monroe family. I want to speak to them in person." Because after 10 years of silence, Skylar Monroe had said something, and I was going to be the one who listened. Melissa Monroe met me at the door, one hand still gripping the frame like she wasn't sure whether to let go. She looked smaller than I remembered, shoulders a little slouched. Her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a loose tie that hadn't seen a brush in a while. It had been 10 years since we last spoke, but I could still picture her on the courthouse steps the day they closed Skylar's case, shaking with quiet anger, while reporters hovered nearby pretending to be helpful. She didn't say anything right away, just nodded once and stepped aside. The Monroe home in Lake Forest Park hadn't changed much since the original investigation. Same crisp white trim, same flagstone walkway, same hedge that curled too close to the driveway. Inside it was silent. Not cold, but still. Like the whole house was waiting for something that never arrived. I followed her down a narrow hallway lined with school photos and vacation snapshots, every frame dusted clean. Skylar's face was everywhere. Her grin at 8 missing 2 teeth. Her sophomore class photo head tilted a faint constellation of freckles across her nose. Near the dining room there was a bulletin board with birthday cards still pinned from the year she vanished. She would have been 26 now. Melissa led me to the living room where David Monroe was already standing. He hadn't sat and didn't look like he planned to. He gave me a short nod and stayed near the far window arms, crossed over a pressed button-down posture, straight as ever. Former Navy, if I remembered right. The man hadn't aged much, but he looked harder around the edges, less open. I didn't waste time. 2 nights ago, I said quietly, we found a fingerprint at the Seattle-Tacoma airport. It was behind a mirror in a maintenance corridor that's being renovated. They didn't move. It matched Skylar's. Melissa's hand went to her mouth. David stared straight ahead. The print was confirmed by the system. Full match. No partials. It was placed 2 days ago. Melissa sat down slowly. David shook his head. No, he said. That's not possible. I understand how it sounds. No, he said again, firmer. She's gone. His voice didn't rise, but it cracked on the word gone. We never confirmed that I said. We just stopped looking. Melissa didn't say anything for a while. She sat forward, eyes fixed on the floor. Is she alive? I don't know, I said, and it was the truth. But someone wants us to believe she is, and I intend to find out who and why. David paced once, then again, then stopped. 10 years. Nothing. Now this. What kind of game is this? I couldn't answer him. The question echoed too close to the one I'd asked myself when my sister disappeared. Why now? Why this moment, this print, this place, and why just enough to be noticed, but not enough to be found? Melissa spoke again, barely above a whisper. If she's alive, why didn't she come home? I looked at her, and I had nothing to offer, because I'd asked that question 1,000 times of my own sister, and silence was the only thing that ever answered back. I stood to go. There's one more thing. I wanted to ask about a name. Tommy. Or maybe TJ, David, and Melissa looked at each other, just a flicker, but it was there. David's voice came fast. No. Melissa didn't speak. I held the moment for a beat, then nodded. Thank you for your time. The air outside had shifted while I was inside. The sun was lower. The breeze was colder. The wind chime on the porch rang once, then stopped. I didn't drive away right away. I sat in the car door, still open, thinking. There had been something in that house that hadn't settled. Not just the grief that I expected. It was something quieter. The way the walls were too clean. The way Melissa hadn't followed up when I mentioned TJ. Like she already knew what I was about to find. I pulled Skylar's file from the passenger seat and opened it across my lap. Inside the front flap was the old interview log, the one from 10 years back. I flipped to the entry from Riley Beck, Skylar's closest friend. It had always bothered me how little space her name took up in the file. Just 2 paragraphs, 1 brief statement. Skylar had told her someone was watching, that she had a backup plan in case she had to disappear. The officer's note in the margin read, likely exaggeration, no further action, and that had been the end of it. I kept scanning the page, and that's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then picked up. Granger. A woman's voice came through. Quiet, hoarse. I'm not safe, she said. He knows. I tried to leave something, but they found me. Who is this? I asked. But there was no answer. Just one more sentence. Don't trust the case file. It's not real. Then the line went dead. I sat there holding the phone like it might ring again. It didn't. No caller ID. No trace. Just the sound of my own breath in the quiet. I didn't call it in. I didn't even move. Not yet. Instead, I reached for the case file again and turned the page. Riley Beck's statement stared back at me. Every sentence felt sharper now. I think she knew something. She was scared. She said someone from school was following her. I closed the file and looked up at the Monroe house. Lights on in the kitchen. No one at the window. And I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever Skylar left behind, someone was trying very hard to erase it. I drove back to the precinct with the file beside me. Just past the freeway interchange, my email pinged. One new message. No subject, no sender. Just an attachment. I pulled into a gas station and opened it. A photo. Grainy black and white. A clearing in the woods. 7 people around a fire. One figure back to the camera-hooded sweatshirt, dark hair tied back. A small chain visible around her neck. I zoomed in. A charm at the bottom. A 5-pointed silver star. I'd seen it before. In a photo from Skylar's sophomore year. She wore that necklace every day. I saved the image to my phone and put the car in gear. Somewhere out there, Skylar Monroe was alive. Or someone wanted me to believe she was. But if she was leaving breadcrumbs, then I wasn't the only one following them, and not everyone wanted the trail to be found. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the blinds half drawn and my coat on the back of the chair like I was waiting to be called out again. I kept going back to that photo, the one from the anonymous email. The clearing in the woods, the 7 figures around the fire, and that silver charm just visible beneath a hoodie. It matched the necklace Skylar used to wear in high school. There was no question in my mind anymore. Someone wanted me to find this, and someone else wanted it erased. By the time the sun came up, I'd made a decision. I drove to the lab myself, not the main building, but the forensic annex where Iris handled off-cycle casework. She was already there, earbuds and coffee in hand, her white coat stained with something that looked like iodine. She didn't seem surprised to see me. Prints still holding at 100% match, she said before I even asked. We retested. 3 times. It's not a misread. I sat down across from her and laid the photo on the table. I need this enhanced, cleaned, and printed. And I want you to take another look at the original scan from the bathroom vent. Not just the print, the surface, the pattern, the angle. Tell me if it looks placed. She raised an eyebrow but nodded. After a minute, she looked up from the tablet. It's too perfect, she said. No distortion, no drag, not even edge diffusion. That print wasn't just left there, it was deposited. Like in a lab setting. Dry surface, even contact. Not something that happens by accident on a vent behind a mirror. I let that sink in for a moment. You think someone planted it? I think someone had her fingerprint, she said. And either they duplicated it, or Skylar's still alive and left it herself. Her voice was even, but her eyes flicked toward the hallway. She didn't want to say it out loud, not in that building. And I didn't blame her. I took the photo and left without another word. I was already turning the pieces in my mind. If someone was planting evidence, someone with access to biometric records, someone who knew where the renovation crew would be working, that narrowed the list. But it also raised a harder question. Why now? Why not years ago? And why? Skylar. I stopped at the corner gas station and used the payphone. I wasn't ready to place this call through department lines. I dialed the only number listed in the original file for Riley Beck. It rang 6 times before a disconnected tone clicked in. So I tried something else. I drove to her last known address, an apartment complex in Everett that had been remodeled into something slicker, more modern, painted steel railings, vape shop across the street, a laundromat with backlit signage. The name on the mailbox was no longer Beck, but I left a card anyway. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. Blocked number. "You left a card," the voice said. Young, uncertain. "You the cop asking about Skylar?" "Yes," I said. "You Riley Beck I used to be," she said, then paused. "You want to talk, you'd better come now. Apartment 3C. Knock twice and wait." She hung up before I could reply. When I got there, she met me at the door, mid-20s pink streak and her hair-nose-piercing sketch pad open on the table behind her. There was a drawing on the page, an unfinished star, 5 points, same shape as the charm. She didn't invite me in at first, just looked me over like she wasn't sure if I'd changed sides. Then she stepped back. They didn't say her name in the news, she said, but I figured it had to be her. I waited while she poured herself some instant coffee and sat on the edge of a futon. The apartment was sparse. Folded blanket on a chair. Small TV with no remote. She pointed to the newsprint photo I'd laid on the counter. "She's alive," she said. "I know it. I don't know where, but I know." "Did you two speak before she vanished?" I asked. "That night?" She stared at the ceiling for a second. "Yeah. She came here. Said she was leaving. Said someone from school had been watching her. Someone who worked there." "Did she give a name?" "She said I'd know it if anything happened, that it would be in what she left behind. I asked her if she remembered a name like Tommy or TJ. Her mouth tightened. She never said it out loud, she said. But I saw bruises. Her locker door once had the words "Trust no one" scratched into it. I didn't get it back then. I hesitated, then asked, "Did she leave anything with you? Anything she might have meant as a message?" Riley stood, crossed the room, and opened a drawer in the side table. She pulled out a shoebox covered in faded stickers. Inside was a VHS tape labeled in black marker. "Skylar if found." She held it like it had weight. "I never had a way to play it," she said. She told me it was only for someone who remembered how things used to be, someone who'd know what to do with it. I took it. Didn't promise anything. Just nodded and left. That night I went into my garage. I dug through 2 boxes of old tech until I found it my dad's VCR, the one he used to record Mariners games when we were kids. The tape clicked into place like it had been waiting. A little static, a glitch. Then Skylar appeared on screen. 16, same freckled face, same soft voice. She looked straight at the camera. "If you're seeing this," she said, "then I'm probably not who I used to be. And you're not either." She paused. "There are more of us. We're not gone. Not really. But we can't come back. Not yet. Because someone made sure we'd never be believed." The screen jumped. Her face flickered. Then a line of text appeared. "Do not trust file 0416B. That was Julia's case file number. My sister's. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The tape wouldn't eject, just sat there humming like it was done. I pulled the plug and sat on the concrete floor. If what Skylar said was true, then everything I'd believed about Julia's case, about how it ended, might have been scripted. Cleaned. Rewritten. The next morning, I pulled the original file from my home archive. Julia's handwriting still marked the spine. I opened it and flipped through every page. On the back of one of the witness statements, misfiled behind a grainy camp photo, was a single interview. Thomas James Connell, TJ. He'd been 19 at the time. Grounds maintenance. No other notes. No follow-up. Nothing. Just his name. I hadn't seen it before. Or maybe I had, and it hadn't meant anything. Now it did. Same man. Same silence. 2 girls. 10 years apart. I turned to my laptop and ran his name through every employment database I had access to. 30 different contracts, schools, camps, janitorial firms. Nothing serious, nothing to tie him to anything, except the pattern. He floated between counties like a ghost, never charged, never noticed, always near. That was the moment it changed. I wasn't chasing a disappearance anymore. I was chasing someone who knew how to hide in plain sight. The drive east toward the foothills always felt longer than it looked on a map. It wasn't the distance, it was the stillness. Empty stretches of road flanked by fir trees, long shadows cutting across two-lane blacktop gas stations that closed at sundown. I was following a name, not a lead. Thomas James Connell. I had his old work records in the passenger seat and a set of scanned maintenance reports flagged from the school district archives. Nothing on him had ever been criminal. Just proximity. Always around when something went missing. Julia in 1996, Skylar in 2013. 2 different counties, 2 different towns, and the same man with keys to places no one else noticed. I kept thinking about what Skylar had said on the tape, how someone made sure they wouldn't be believed. It was easier to dismiss a scared girl than it was to dig through paperwork. I would have dismissed it too back then. Probably did. The cabin wasn't listed as a residence, but it came up in a land use filing 6 years back, wooded parcel, private well generator power only. On paper, it was for storage. But someone had been living there. A utilities reader had logged water usage last month. I got there late afternoon just as the sky was starting to gray out. The property sat behind a locked gate, the gravel driveway lined with moss and old tire tracks. I parked off the road and walked the last quarter mile. No neighbors, no mailbox, just a slope of pine and the wind rustling low through branches. The cabin was small, unpainted wood roofline uneven. There was a porch light hanging sideways from a nail and a blue pickup backed against the tree line. I stood a few yards back and waited. No sound. I approached slowly, careful where I stepped. The front door wasn't locked. It opened on the first try. Inside, the smell hit me first, oil mildew and something sharper underneath. The air was still. A small heater buzzed in the corner. The furniture was minimal. A single chair near a folding table. No pictures, no curtains. But in the corner, stacked from floor to ceiling, were boxes, each one labeled by year, some marked with initials. A few had school logos taped to the side. I moved closer, and my stomach tightened. Each box held files, old report cards, photocopied ID badges, sketches on notebook paper, school photos. Some were faded. Some were fresh. I saw Skylar's name first, then Riley's, then Julia's. I opened the one marked JG. Inside was a laminated school schedule, a ribbon from her 6th grade spelling bee, and a copy of the campgrounds map from the summer she disappeared. A section was circled in red. In Skylar's box was a candid photo. She was sitting on a set of bleachers, staring off in a direction the camera hadn't captured. Her necklace was visible, the silver star resting just above her collar. Underneath it, a printed copy of her math test corner torn, circled with a check mark. Someone had been watching her life like a collector watches artifacts, gathering, labeling, preserving. I turned slowly, took in the room again. The bare walls, the unwashed mug on the table, the lined-up files. This wasn't a shrine. It wasn't grief. It was storage. And whoever kept it this way didn't want them remembered. They wanted them recorded. Before I could move, I heard the shift of a floorboard behind me. I turned. He was standing in the hallway, buzzed hair, broad shoulders, face unreadable. He didn't raise his hands, didn't reach for anything, just looked at me like I was the one who'd made the mistake. "You shouldn't be here," he said. I kept my voice low. "Where are they?" He didn't blink. "I didn't take them. You followed them. You kept records. I kept them safe. I stepped closer. Safe from what? From the ones who come after, he said. I gave them rules. I gave them choices. I drew my weapon. Where's Skylar? His tone didn't change. She figured it out. She's smarter than you think. I told him to get on the ground. He didn't move, just smiled thin and quiet. You think she needs saving, he said. But you're 10 years late. I saw it in his eyes before he moved. He lunged. I fired twice. He dropped against the wall, blood spreading across his shirt like ink. I checked for a pulse. There wasn't one. His lips parted once more. I leaned in close. Check the basement, he said, and then went still. I stood there for a long second before backing into the hall. The door to the basement was near the back, just past a shelf stacked with old electronics. It creaked when I opened it. The stairs were narrow wood damp to the touch. I drew my flashlight and stepped down. The air changed halfway. Cooler, more stale. It wasn't a finished room, just a concrete floor, exposed beams, and metal shelves running the length of the far wall. But in the center, chained to a pillar, was a TV and a stack of VHS tapes, each one labeled with a name. Skylar, Julia, Riley, others I didn't recognize. I picked up the one marked Skylar and slid it into the player. The screen cracked to life. She was older now, eyes tired, hair shorter. Her voice was calm. If you found this, then you know he wasn't working alone, she said. He was the collector, the messenger. But the others, they're still out there, watching, waiting. She hesitated. They have files on all of us, girls who didn't follow the rules, girls who saw something, girls who tried to leave. She looked off screen, then back. And if you're here, you're next. The screen went black. Then I heard it. A shift in metal. I turned. The basement door above slammed shut. The bolt slid from the outside. I ran up the steps and hit it with my shoulder. Nothing. No give. My flashlight flickered, then steadied. There was no signal on my phone, just empty bars. I stepped back, scanned the room again. On the underside of the staircase, something was scratched into the wood. A date, July 13th. Today. And a phrase beneath it. Welcome home. I leaned against the wall, breath slowing. There was no panic, not yet. Just the quiet weight of knowing I'd stepped into something meant to keep me, and that someone had known I would. In the corner, the other tapes waited. I picked up the one with Julia's name and held it in my hands. I sat on the concrete floor for longer than I meant to, holding the tape with Julia's name written across the label in black ink. The room was still. No footsteps above, no wind. Just the low hum of the television screen, and the weight of knowing someone had cataloged her like a file, like a chapter in a binder. I slid the tape into the player. Static gave way to a flicker, then a picture. Julia, 12 years old, hair pinned back, cheeks flushed from crying. She sat on a wooden bench in a small room with unfinished walls. There was a voice off-screen, male flat, asking her to speak clearly. Julia looked into the camera. He told me to follow the light, she said. I thought it was a game. She blinked, wiped her nose on her sleeve. He said if I said anything, he'd hurt Leah. That was all. The tape cut to black. I didn't cry, not right then, right? Just sat there as the screen went dark again and the room folded back into itself. She'd tried to leave signs. I'd spent 2 decades thinking she'd vanished in the woods like a ghost. But she'd been locked in a room, staring into a camera, whispering warnings to anyone who might care enough to find her. I stood up slowly, my legs stiff from sitting too long. The light from my backup flashlight was starting to dim. I checked my phone again, still no signal. I scanned the shelves one more time, looking for anything that might give me leverage or direction. Most of the boxes were unlabeled. A few had initials. But one thing caught my eye, an old-school backpack tucked behind a milk crate. It was navy blue, faded at the edges, zipper nearly rusted shut. I pulled it out and unzipped it carefully. Inside was a flannel shirt wrapped around a spiral notebook. I opened the cover. Property of Skylar Monroe. The first page was messy, a few ink stains across the corner. I flipped past doodles and torn pages until I hit a section with dates entries from the weeks leading up to her disappearance. One line stood out. He was outside again last night, just past the fence. I don't think Mom sees it. Another. The star isn't just a necklace. It's the signal. And then one that tightened something in my chest. TJ said if I told anyone he'd come for Riley next. I kept flipping. Most of it was jumbled pieces of fear sketched out in half-thoughts, but it was consistent. Names. Warnings. She believed someone was tracking her and not just following filing labeling threatening. I flagged a few of the entries and packed the journal into an evidence bag I found on the shelf. I couldn't take much. I didn't know how long I'd be down there, but I had enough to start pulling threads again. I turned back toward the stairs, running my fingers along the underside where I'd seen the scratched message before. There was something else I hadn't noticed, an old lock mechanism, not digital, manual, 4 digits. I stared at it for a few seconds. Then I keyed in the only number that had mattered since this began. 0, 4, 1, 6. It clicked. The bolt slid. The door opened. I stepped out into the hallway. The cabin was still quiet. The porch light was still flickering. No one waited at the threshold. I didn't stop to wonder who had shut the door behind me or why they'd left the code. I just drove. No GPS, no music. Just the road and the low rattle of the defrost fighting the mountain air. I made it back to the precinct by sunrise. I didn't check in, didn't go through protocol. I went straight to the archives. Municipal records, the basement level. No barcodes, no scanner logs, just old steel cabinets lined up like crypts, each one labeled by hand. I found it by touch more than sight. File 0416B, Julia's, the original. The copy I'd used for years was upstairs, digitized clean. This one smelled like dust and oil. I opened it on the table under a flickering fluorescent light. The first pages were the same timeline witness notes incident summary, but halfway through a stapled packet appeared. Different stock. No department header, no release stamp. It was labeled Internal Addendum, Do Not Release. The first page was dated 2 weeks after Julia disappeared. It listed an unofficial review conducted by someone named Captain Randall Tellis. He'd been a detective at the time. Now he was division chief. My division chief. His signature was at the bottom of the memo. The language was cold. It referenced possible behavioral overlap with another case marked G37. The recommendation was to assign runaway status close publicly and archive the file permanently. No alerts. No external report. The last line read, "To avoid escalation or copycat behavior, this case will not be revisited without direct supervisory clearance." I kept flipping. Near the back of the packet was a grainy photocopy of a still frame. Julia again. Not in the woods. Not in a tent. In a room, same bench, same light. But this time a window behind her showed a reflection. A man. Cropped hair, shoulders turned, the edge of a badge clipped to his belt. It was him. Tellis had seen her. He'd buried the tape. Buried the case. I didn't remember sitting down, but I found myself in the break room an hour later holding a copy of the frame in one hand and the journal in the other. I scanned a page from Skylar's notebook, then cross-referenced it with the school logs. The initials OK came up twice in the margin, once with the word signal, once with the word map. I didn't know what they meant yet, but I knew they weren't meant for me. Not alone. I walked upstairs and filed an internal request for external analysis. Then I made a call to Iris. "Can you get me a trace on someone named Owen Calder?" She didn't ask why, just said she'd call me back. 30 minutes later, I had an address, east of Spokane, retired NYPD, now writing casework on unsolved disappearances tied to a pattern of marks. Girls who'd drawn stars on notebooks or left them carved into tree trunks. Not folklore, not rumor, records. He'd been dismissed by half a dozen departments, but he kept publishing. I sent a message, told him I was coming. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't lock my door. I just took Skylar's journal, Julia's file, and a printout of the frame that proved someone at the top had known all along. As I turned out of the precinct lot, I saw the porch light flicker on the neighboring house across the street, same rhythm as the one outside the cabin. One long blink, then stillness. I kept driving. The pages beside me didn't make a map yet, but they were starting to form a pattern, one I couldn't stop seeing, and one I couldn't unsee now if I tried. Owen Calder lived in a one-story house on the edge of a bluff just west of Spokane. The gravel crackled under my tires as I pulled into the drive, framed on both sides by leaning pine. There was no mailbox, no numbers painted anywhere, just a flagpole out front and a handmade sign that read "Private." I sat for a moment before stepping out. The front porch sagged in the middle, the screen door hung crooked on one hinge, and the windows were yellowed with time. I knocked once. The shuffle of feet came slowly. Then the door opened a crack, and a man in his late 60s looked me over his eyes, scanning my badge before they met mine. His voice was flat. "You're the one who sent the photo." I nodded. "Detective Leah Granger, Seattle PD." He stepped aside without another word and left the door open. Inside, the space was dim but warm, the air dense with paper and old coffee. The walls were covered maps pinned edge to edge, red string tacked across state lines, sticky notes curling at the corners. On a corkboard near the hallway was a photo of Skylar, the same school picture I had in her file. I followed him to the kitchen where he poured coffee into mismatched mugs. No cream, no sugar. "I thought they stopped looking," he said. "They did," I answered. "But I didn't." He nodded once. "Then let's talk." We sat in the back room where he kept his notes. File boxes lined the walls. Some were labeled with initials, others with nicknames or symbols, stars, triangles, a circle with a slash. He gestured toward a chalkboard where a list of names was written down one side. At the bottom was Julia. I didn't react. He noticed. "I thought she might have been one of the early ones," he said quietly. "But it never went public, and by the time I traced the camp, the record had gone cold." "She was my sister," I said. "I know," he replied. "That's why I answered your message." He walked over to a small file drawer, unlocked it, and pulled a manila folder from the back. Inside were photocopies of newspaper clippings, attendance rosters, and several hand-drawn reproductions of a symbol, a 5-pointed star with a line breaking through the center. "The star started out as a marker," he said, "not a gang sign, not a cult. A signal. Something girls used to warn each other. Locker doors, sketchbooks, the underside of desks. Most people thought it was harmless. He handed me one of the sketches. But it wasn't just coincidence. It was a pattern. One they were passing through safe channels, places no adult would look. "Why the star?" I asked. He pointed toward a stack of binders. It meant they'd seen something, or someone. Some used it to say they were in danger, others to say they were trying to leave. He stepped back, but they were careful, because the minute someone talked, someone else disappeared. I sat with that for a moment, flipping through the notes. A list of 47 names, ages 11 to 17, spread across 4 states. "Did they know each other?" I asked. "Not directly," he said, "but they were networked, quietly, most through handwritten notes. One girl left a star etched behind a baseboard heater. Another scratched it under her bed frame at a group home. We only found out because the building was condemned and torn down. The star was still there. I pulled Skylar's notebook from my bag and handed it over. He took it carefully, flipping through the entries, stopping when he reached the lines about TJ. "This is the same man from the camp." "Yes," I said. "He kept files. Years' worth." "Then he wasn't working alone," Owen said. "He was a facilitator, a collector, probably worked under the radar for someone else. The question is who gave him names, and why some of them ended up marked and others didn't." He slid the notebook back toward me. "I think Skylar figured it out. She got far enough to know who to fear. That's why she's still alive." I stood and walked to the corkboard. On one edge was a scanned copy of a drawing charcoal on lined paper. A girl wearing a hoodie. Her head turned slightly, a silver charm drawn around her neck. "That's from a drop site," he said. "Found in Oregon last year. Unclaimed, no fingerprints. But I cross-referenced the necklace with your missing girl." "Same shape." "She's still leaving messages," I said. "You think she's trying to come back?" "I think she never left," he said. "She's moving between the cracks. Just enough to be seen, never long enough to be caught." He paused. "But someone else is watching too. They don't always erase. Sometimes they just wait until no one's looking." We talked for another hour. I copied down his contact list, took photos of his map layout, and promised I'd send scans of the tapes if forensics cleared them. Before I left, he handed me one more file. No label on the outside. Inside was a list of initials and dates. No names, just codes. But one caught my eye. B38, July 11th, 2013. Skylar's disappearance date. "What's this?" I asked. "Unofficial intake registry," he said. I found it buried in an old construction firm's personnel archive. They did subcontracting work for public facilities. It was mixed in with background checks. "You think it's real?" "I think someone thought it was safe enough to forget." I stepped outside. The wind had picked up. The trees along the bluff moved slow and steady like waves that never broke. I didn't drive back to Seattle that night. I slept in the car parked at a rest stop off the highway, the map spread across the passenger seat and Skylar's journal on the dash. I marked the date B38. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I knew it wasn't the last time I'd see it. And somewhere out there, Skylar was still walking the edge of it, leaving symbols for someone to follow, and someone else to fear. I got back to Seattle just after dark, parked a block from the precinct, and sat for a long time before going in. I didn't want to walk past that front desk and see Tellis sitting in his office, still behind the glass, still holding a key to every locked file I'd been prying open piece by piece. So I didn't. I went around the back instead, through the loading bay and up the service stairwell to the 3rd floor. The lights were low. Quiet hum from the vending machine in the break room, but no footsteps. I logged into my terminal, copied Owen Calder's registry, and sent it to Iris with a short note. Cross-reference these codes with juvenile records from 2003 to 2015. Filter by date of disappearance. She replied in under 3 minutes. Already on it. I could hear her typing in the lab 2 doors down. I printed 3 copies of the photo from Owen's archive, the girl in the hoodie, the silver charm. The resolution wasn't great, but the profile was enough. I pinned one to my whiteboard just beneath Skylar's sophomore yearbook portrait. I drew a thin red line between them, not to connect identities, to track intention. One was a girl who went missing. The other was a girl still trying to be found. Somewhere after midnight, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, just like before. I didn't hesitate this time. Granger. Silence, then the faintest breath. I saw the file, the voice said. You opened it. Female. Same as before. You knew about Tellis, I asked, since the camp. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to scare her off. Are you safe? She laughed once, a dry sound. There is no safe. just further out. Is Skylar with you? Not anymore. The line crackled. But she left something. It wasn't meant for them. Where's C28? It's still there, just not where you're looking. Then the call dropped. I sat in the dark, the room humming faintly around me, and stared at the list Iris had just sent. 23 matches, all girls, all marked with unexplained departures. Some moved, some expelled, a few just gone. The code B38 came up twice, once under Skylar's initials, and once beside a girl I didn't recognize. I called Iris. What do we have on B38? She hesitated. It doesn't correspond to any standard district coding. It's not birth date, not enrollment ID. What about contractor logs? Maintenance. A pause, then her voice dropped. We just found something strange. A cleaning staff roster from the week Skylar disappeared C28 bathrooms. Only one name shows up. Not TJ. Different badge, still active. Who he's listed under city facilities. Not school district, but his access pattern overlaps with 5 of the disappearances on the list, including Julia. I wrote the name down, Mark Hanley. Not someone I'd seen before. No arrest record, no incident reports. But his badge had clearance to 4 locations no one had flagged until now: an old ferry terminal, 2 public schools, and SeaTac's maintenance level. I requested a full scan of the airport archives going back 12 years. No red flags. But 2 years ago, he transferred departments. Off the grid. Still on payroll, just under a different contractor name. I drove out to the ferry terminal at sunrise. The city had long since closed. The building boarded up the docks, posted signs about unstable concrete and shoreline erosion. But the outer gate was still loose padlock cut. I walked the perimeter first. Quiet. No footprints in the gravel, no tire tracks. Then I saw it half buried in the retaining wall just past the loading ramp. A scrap of denim caught in the chain link sun-bleached. I followed the fence line until I found the loose corner, pulled it back, and stepped through. The backpack was there, faded navy blue, zipper broken. Inside was a plastic bag wrapped around a notebook. Skylar's handwriting on the cover, the same as the journal from the cabin, but different pages. These were newer. The entries were clipped, guarded, dates crossed out. But one page was left untouched. A sketch of a hallway, narrow, angled walls, a mirror near the end. C28. I drove straight to the airport. No warning, no call. Just walked in, flashed my badge, and requested immediate access to the maintenance corridor behind the gate. The same janitor from before met me by the service entrance. He looked nervous. Eyes on the floor. We already cleaned that section, he said. 3 days ago. I don't want clean, I told him. I want untouched. He led me down a narrow passage behind the row of shops and restrooms. It smelled like bleach and copper. At the end of the hallway, just beneath a rusted vent, I saw it fresh etching in the metal. Not a star. A string of numbers. 4 digits. I recognized the first 2. 04. The other 2 had been scratched deeper over and over again, like whoever had done it wasn't sure they'd be seen. 16. Then a symbol I hadn't seen before, half a star sliced down the middle. I didn't say anything out loud. I just took a photo and left. On my way out, I passed the janitor again. He looked like he wanted to speak, but didn't. I handed him my card. If you remember anything, any detail, no matter how small you call me. He nodded. I didn't expect to hear from him. But he'd seen something. Or maybe he hadn't. Maybe he was just trying not to. I drove home and printed the photo. Pinned it beside Julia's old camp photo. 2 walls, 2 messages, 2 warnings 10 years apart. But the same signature, same code. It was never about the files. It was about the ones who knew how to write in places no one would check. the ones who learned how to leave behind just enough. I looked at the board again. The star wasn't just a marker. It was a fracture line, and I had a feeling the next piece would split everything open. It was late, maybe after 2 a.m. when I got the message. Not a call this time. Just a single photo sent to my phone from a number that vanished seconds later. The image showed the side of a storage trailer overgrown with ivy and nearly obscured by brush. But near the bottom corner, someone had scraped the star 5 points sharp and even into the rusted metal. I recognized the lot. County maintenance used it years ago for surplus, then abandoned it when the budget shifted. It sat behind the old train yard on the edge of shoreline, fenced in and forgotten. I left without telling anyone. Didn't bother logging it. Something about it felt deliberate, not urgent, like the kind of signal meant only for people who knew where to look. The night was quiet. The air smelled like creosote and weeds. I parked near the service gate and cut through the gap in the fencing where the links had been pulled back long ago. No cameras, no lights, just rows of rusted containers and the low groan of wind pushing through the siding. I moved slowly between the trailers until I found the one from the photo. Same ivy, same angle. I ran my fingers over the star. It was recent. Beneath the rust, the metal was clean. I circled to the back and found the latch pried loose with what looked like a crowbar. Inside was dark, but not empty. There was a folding chair, a blanket, an old lantern that had long since burned out, and on the floor under a plastic sheet was a taped envelope. I lifted it carefully. Inside was a photo Skylar again this time, not in a crowd or caught mid-motion, but standing alone in front of a concrete wall. Her expression was calm. Her hair was shorter than before, and around her neck the silver star hung clearly. On the back of the photo was a date. 3 days ago. I sat down on the edge of the trailer, still holding the picture, trying to place the background. The wall looked familiar, but it wasn't from the airport. Too smooth. No piping. Then I remembered the ferry terminal, the loading bay. I pulled up an archived image on my phone, zoomed in. The bricks matched. The pattern in the mortar. She had been there. Recently. I sent the image to Iris with a timestamp. Can you cross-check this background with regional transit footage from last week? Look for anything near the waterfront. She replied in less than 10 minutes. Working on it. But there's something else you need to see. I drove straight to the lab. Iris met me at the back entrance, holding a printout in one hand and her phone in the other. You asked me to look into the maintenance contractor Mark Hanley, she said. He's gone. Gone how? No forwarding info, no exit paperwork. But this morning someone tried to wipe his employment record, not from the system physically. Paper files. Cabinet in records room 3. She handed me a log sheet. His name had been circled, then blacked out. We've got it on camera, she said. But it doesn't show a face. Someone wearing a department jacket moving with a master key. Tellis can't prove it yet, she said. But you asked about code B38. I cross-referenced that with Hanley's ID tags. She flipped her phone around. It was a maintenance map, outdated but still legible. B38 isn't a case code, she said. It's a unit designation, an equipment code, the type of trailer they used for auxiliary containment. You're not going to like where it leads. We're Crescent Lake Logistics Yard, decommissioned in 2009. All records routed through facilities. Guess who signed off the transfer paperwork? Tell us, I said. She nodded. I drove out before the sun came up. It was almost ceremonial by now, these places that were meant to be temporary, quiet, invisible. The logistics yard sat on the southern ridge, surrounded by thinning trees and a service road that hadn't been maintained in over a decade. The main gate was chained, but the side trail was open tire tracks fresh. Inside the yard, most of the trailers were locked, but the last one, painted gray with faded stenciling, was different. The door hung open. The air inside smelled like rust and bleach. There were no bodies, no names, just files. Dozens of them sorted in identical black binders tagged with initials and dates. I flipped through one at random. DM, July 2007. Notes in shorthand, no full sentences. But the tone was unmistakable, clinical, detached. Pages documenting school schedules, parent work hours, known confidants. I recognized the pattern: surveillance. Not just of behavior, but of vulnerability. Who'd be believed? Who wouldn't? Who had already reported something, and which reports had been buried? At the back of the trailer on a narrow table was a terminal. Old, outdated OS, but still running. I scrolled through the local drive. Each folder was named for a location: school, names, campgrounds, civic centers. One was labeled Julia 0416B. I opened it. There were two subfolders. One was audio, the other was labeled Tape D. I clicked play on the audio file. My sister's voice came through the speaker. Quiet, scared. He said I had to act like I got lost, she whispered, that it wouldn't take long. I stopped the playback. My hands were steady. Not cold, just still. I downloaded the folder, pulled the hard drive, and packed the binder into my satchel. As I left, I saw one last thing scratched into the inside of the door. It wasn't a name, just a symbol. The star. But this time someone had drawn a second line through it like a warning. Or an ending. I didn't go back to the station. Not yet. I drove to the overlook outside town and sat there until my phone buzzed again. It was a text. No number, just a message. You saw it. Now finish it. Beneath the words was a location pin, near the airport, back to where it began. I turned the key in the ignition, and for the first time since this all started, I didn't feel like I was chasing something. I felt like I was being invited in. I found her at the edge of the crowd near Gate C28 just after noon. She wasn't trying to hide, just blending in. Hoodie pulled, low bag slung over one shoulder. Her eyes caught mine before I spoke. I didn't call her name. I didn't have to. Skylar stepped forward like she'd already decided to. She didn't ask what I knew or how much I'd seen. She just held out her hand. In it was the silver star. No chain. Just the charm, worn and cool against my palm. I don't want to carry it anymore, she said. I nodded and didn't press her. Some people leave the past behind. Others carry it until someone else is strong enough to take the weight. Are there more of you? I asked. Her answer was quiet. There were. Some made it out. Some didn't. Some we're still waiting on. I told her what I'd found: the binders, the trailer, the voice recordings. I told her about Tellis and the folder buried under his name. She didn't seem surprised. He was never the only one, she said. Just the one with keys. I wanted to ask about Julia, but I didn't. Not yet. Skylar looked past me toward the long hallway that led back to the maintenance corridors. You'll find her, she said. Just not there. I asked her what she meant. She shook her head. You'll know when it's time. She turned and disappeared into the terminal crowd. I didn't follow. I drove back to the precinct and turned over everything. Every file, every scan, every recorded minute. I filed a formal complaint. The investigation launched within the week. Tellis was placed on leave, then quietly retired. No charges were filed. The department called it mishandled oversight, clerical irregularity. But people knew. Not just officers. Journalists picked it up. Former students. Parents. It didn't disappear. Not this time. Months later, a small package arrived at my door. No return address. Inside was a photograph, faded, folded at the corners. Julia standing in front of a school in Oregon, her arm around someone just out of frame. She looked older, not by much, but enough to know it was real. On the back, someone had written, "We're still watching the star." I don't know where she is now, or if I'll ever hear from her again. But that one image, her smile, steady and unbroken, quieted something in me that had been loud for years. I kept the photo on my desk just beside Skylar's charm. Sometimes late in the day, I'd catch myself staring at it, not thinking, just remembering. Not everything ends in answers. Some stories close in silence, others in small acts of survival. But this one ended with a girl who refused to vanish, and a sister who left a trail just clear enough to follow. If this story meant something to you, if someone you loved ever disappeared from a place no one thought to check, leave a name. Say it out loud. Write it down. Because sometimes that's how we bring them back, one name at a time, at a